Hey, it's the big 10, episode number 10. I don't know why I did that. It's not even a big enough number. We've only been doing this for 10 episodes. But yeah, we have been doing this for 10 episodes. I think that warrants some celebration.
Pat on your back.
Pat on your back too.
Yeah. It's still sinking in that we've recorded 10 episodes, actually 11. But yeah, this is episode 10 official.
Yeah. No, but we did end up releasing episode 0.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. Counting that, it's episode 11. But no, it's episode 10.
Sorry if we messed up that way.
Yeah, whatever. It's okay. It's all right. Yeah, so we are in a pretty fun mood. And I think a lot of that owes to the conversation that we just had. We chatted with Johannes Grossman.
Yeah,
Who is Johann Grossman or Han Grossman?
Sorry.
Depending on how good your German is.
So, if you've heard bands like Blotted Science, Necrophagist, Alkaloid, Obscura. Yeah. You've probably heard him play the drums for that band.
Let me add a few other names. Triptykon, Hate Eternal.
Yeah, dude. And the list goes on. I mean, the guy boasts a CV that probably looks way better than most musicians, man. And he's played in so many bands.
Yeah, it's almost Gene Hoglan-esque. It's only that Gene Hoglan has been doing this for far longer than he has. He's only 36.
Yeah, and
not Gene Hoglan, by the way. That's Johann. Johann is 36.
Yeah, it was such a good chat. I mean, and it's such a different chat because we didn't mainly talk about his bands that he performed in, but we talked about his solo release that he put out last month.
And we also talked about his life as a session musician, which means that he's a gun for hire. And I could totally relate with him to that on a personal level. So there's a lot of non-musical stuff, but just fun, entertaining stuff that we bonded a bit about. I think he enjoyed the conversation too.
Yeah.
That we bonded a bit about. So, enough about that lovely introduction. Let's dive right into that interview. And now joining us from Nuremberg, Germany is drummer extraordinaire Hans Grossman. Hans up. How are you doing?
Hey, how are you doing? Great to be here.
We're glad you could take time out and come out on our show. Just to start off with, congratulations on the release of your album, Apophenia. I hope I got that correct.
Apophenia, right?
Yeah.
Apophenia, yeah, that's correct.
How's the response been? Are you happy with it?
The response has been thoroughly positive. Really, really few criticism, which makes me wonder, did I do it right? Because, usually I think it's not too bad if certain people, have a different opinion on it, but it seems to be like the general vibe is really, really positive. People that, especially that liked my other 2 albums, are very, seem to be very psyched about it. So I'm really happy about that.
So here at Horns Up, we believe that the past is as important as the present and, of course, the future. So let's just take a step back and go back to your roots. While we were doing research, we saw your bio and it reads that you come from a musical family and started playing the piano at age 8 and picked up the drums at the tender age of 10. So we wanted to know, what led to you picking up the drums?
Actually, I was at a friend of mine at his house, and we were little kids and playing, and he owned a drum set and he was getting drum lessons, and I sat down and just fooled around with the instrument, and I fell in love with it. I thought it's amazing. It's the most amazing, most interesting thing I've ever seen. And from that day on, I wanted to play the drums, and we're getting on the nerves of my parents for like a year to finally get me a drum set, and then I could start. It was totally different than with piano, because for piano, my parents thought it's good that children get formal musical education, and it is. I agree with it. It helped me a lot in hindsight, but it wasn't I wasn't falling in love with that instrument. I liked the sound of the piano, but playing it was not so much fun, especially in the classical training.
So, do you remember the first time someone asked you to play softer or not as loud?
Oh yeah, it still happens to this day. But yeah, working with metal guys and working with metal music, most of the time it's fine the way I play. But in general, now I can control it much better than when I was younger. When I was younger, I had to learn to step back a little and not play as loud as I can, and developing the technique that allows me to. But yeah, in general, I don't really remember when I gotten this request the first time, but I think it came pretty soon after picking up the instrument.
And it could probably be your neighbors, I'm sure.
No, they were fine with it actually. I have to say.
That means you have good neighbors.
Yeah, I was in the basement and there wasn't so much noise. Actually, everybody went to work. When I was still coming from school, they were still at work and nobody was in the house, so that's fine.
Now that we're still at your formative years, what what is the first like extreme metal band that you heard, or what got you into extreme metal?
That's a good question. I think friends of mine were listening to more extreme metal, and I didn't honestly didn't really like it. I was more into 60s, 70s music, and then prog rock, and maybe some metal like Iron Maiden, and I liked
Okay.
Rush a lot. But I was not particularly interested in the most extreme stuff, especially because of the vocals, because I didn't get it. And I have to say, when I was 16, the first band, a real band I played in, they were playing death metal. Um, and I was more interested to play with other musicians that had ambition rather than for the music. But when I learned their material, I had to figure out that it's quite challenging to play, and that you can basically more or less do whatever you want in certain frames. So if you want to play a really, really busy drum line and compose that for the song, that's fine. Whereas in, well, let's say more normal music and normal rock music, you have to stick to a certain beat. You don't necessarily have to do that with death metal. And what I found immediately interesting is the fact that there are so many, that I saw so many things to this relatively new genre that weren't done so far, that you could still achieve and create something new. Because I had the feeling that rock and pop music is pretty much set in stone, and you really have to leave that field in order to create something new. And I think the first band that taught me that you can achieve musically interesting songs and be quite technical was actually Cannibal Corpse, I think.
Ooh,
Oh wow. Okay,
okay.
this is the first time you've kind of heard something like this.
Yeah, because usually people just go and say, like, yeah, it was Metallica that influenced me, or Iron Maiden that I
Or
first heard,
Judas
or
Priest, yeah.
Maximum Slayer.
Absolutely. Now those bands, but I don't consider them as extreme bands. They're a little step, they're more metal than, or they're a little harder, a little heavier than hard rock or than heavier rock music, which I was listening to anyways. Like if you have Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin, which I loved when I was a kid, and still I'm into these bands. Going from that to Iron Maiden, that's not a far stretch. It's just a little bit more metal, I guess. But if you go from Deep Purple to Cannibal Corpse, that's quite a stretch. And of course, I had to. First, I was into Judas Priest and Maiden and all the old school bands, and then eventually I found some interesting, musically interesting bands in the more extreme metal genre.
So, just a follow up question to that. What kind of attracted you to Cannibal Corpse? Was it the extreme music, the imagery?
Or the sheer technicality
Yeah.
of the music that you were hearing.
I would say not so much the imagery, and not so much that it's extreme. Of course, yeah, I was, even though when I was a kid and listening to the Beatles, I was always more interested in a song like Helter Skelter than, for instance, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. I always say this example so people who don't have no clue about metal can actually understand where I'm coming from. I was always into the more wild stuff, anyways, and it was maybe just a matter of time.
Right.
But back then in the 90s, I think a lot of death metal was still formulating and was difficult to find music that on a scale because in regular rock music, you had guys like Steve Vai and on the guitar and Frank Zappa and these people like that took music to not necessarily technically, but in a musical sense, to new levels. And in death metal, it was first all about being extreme and being aggressive and all of that. And then I thought like that's fine, but I thought it's easy to achieve that by just making noise for the sake of it, and that of course has a value. But then what's the next thing? What then do you go from there? When you have extreme bands like Napalm Death or something that made heavy music and extreme music and be extreme and make noisy music, have blast beats, all of that. So where do you go from there musically? And I thought like Cannibal Corpse was the first band that grabbed my attention because everything sounded really precisely and clean and also technical, and it was musically interesting. It was different from the other metal that I knew because
Hmm.
everything was so well structured and all the riffs were so clearly audible, and it had this brutality, but in a way where they were communicating, hey, we know what we're doing. It's not just the
Yeah.
sake of noise and being extreme. We actually know how to express that on a higher musical level. And then I got into other bands and appreciated that aspect more. But yeah,
Okay,
there was kind of a gateway band in some sense.
that's lovely. That'll really give some credence to the Cannibal Corpse fans that are in India. Anyways, now you're known to the metal community thanks to your fabulous work with Necrophagist and then Obscura, Blotted Science, and a countless other bands. Um, how would you define each of them in one word? So we'll name the band, and can we have you define them in one word? Yeah, do you want to try that?
Okay, I'm not really good at that. Keeping
Let's
things.
try.
Let's try keeping it to a sentence at least. Come on.
Let's try
Okay,
it. Okay, so going one by one. Okay, first up, Necrophagist.
it's a game changer.
All right. Obscura.
Formulating my own voice as a composer.
Blotted Science.
Fun.
Alkaloid.
All of these things.
Triptykon.
Privilege, I would say. It's a privilege to play in that band. I think it's yeah.
Hate Eternal.
Hey, to also privilege and sheer musical brutality.
And finally, Hans Grossman.
A fun project where I don't have like the music, my solo records, a fun project where I don't have to think much about it. I just, you know, do metal songs for just doing it.
All right.
Lovely. See,
Lovely.
that was pretty easy.
Yeah, that was fun also. So, one of the things we'd like to talk to you more about, and especially the facet of your life where you're being a session musician. So, how do you evaluate bands that ask you to play with them, and what do you look for?
I look, well, of course, first of all, for music that I find interesting. I I don't find everything interesting. Actually, most of the time, if it's really, really close to what I did before, and if it's not with the same excitement and all the stuff, I'm most likely not gonna do it because
Okay.
I've done it already. And you know, but I would say if there's some kind of professionalism behind it, and I don't mean that people have to make this full time. It's more about serious, if they really want to seriously work on something. And most of the time, you the first impression is the right one. Most of the time, if people send me requests and it's well formulated, their request is well formulated. They have demos and they are serious about it. Actually, seriously paying my fee that I demand for recording.
Mm-hmm.
That shows me most of the time that they're serious about the outcome of that. That they
Okay.
don't want to just have a drum computer and program it and do it for sheer fun, but they have some ambition, and I think that's really important because I don't want to waste my time with stuff, and it has to be worthwhile. I'm doing it.
Okay. Having said that, what is an ideal creative relationship or a partnership like for you? And how do you develop the same? How different is it when you're a session musician as opposed to when you're part of a band? Just working with other people.
And when I'm part of a band, of course, it's way more personal. I was always a band. I considered myself always as a band guy, and um, most when if these days it was possible to have just one band and make a living out of that. I mean, there you can the bands that do so. First of all, they're on tour all year, and it's a couple of bands, maybe 10 metal bands that do it full time or something like that over here in Europe. And even though when you do get paid relatively well for shows in some of the bands I play, um, to make it a full time only thing, then it would require uh, a whole different level of doing it, and I'm afraid it's not possible. That's why I chose. Also, it's just one thing. Again, then it's just one thing. Then you lock into this one thing, and what if it fails? I had the Of course, I committed myself to bands in the past, and somehow the relationship failed, and it happens with people sometimes. And I wouldn't make a bet to put everything in one thing anymore. So that's why I'm also doing session work, and I'm also got really interested in producing and mixing and mastering. So I'm more and more doing that because that's something I really, really like and I have a huge interest for. And if I was on tour 9 months the year, I couldn't do it. So I have to somehow um, do everything that's possible to make a living of that. What was your initial question? Because I wanted to make.
So, my initial question to you was, considering you're a session musician and you do this quite a lot, how do you form an ideal creative relationship or a partnership with whoever it is that you are being a session musician for?
In a band, for me, the crucial part is that it is really a band that people that are involved in it have either an equal say or at least a share of decision making. And
Okay. Does it work the same way when you're a session musician?
when you're a session musician, of course, you don't have a say in most things because then it's somebody else's project. That's maybe the reason. If somebody needs me to shape their vision, that's great. That's great to be there. That's great to help them out. But if it would be totally different if I was a member in a band and then I want to have some kind of impact and some part of my personality in there. Of course, I have that in session work too, but with session work, it's a customer relationship, more or less, at the end of the day. Because if they say, please change that part because how we initially wrote it, then I'll do it.
Okay.
And maybe I always respect the songwriter, but then it's way more inclusive in that sense. And also in a real band, not it's not. I've played in bands where it's basically a one man project with hired guns, and and that's fine if they want to do it, but then I wouldn't consider it a band, and I don't for myself, even though it might be communicated in that sense. So the bands that I'm in are bands, real bands, and that's where I make the distinction between. Um,
Okay.
Yeah, so it's more the thing when I offer session work, I'm offering a service. When I'm in a
Mm-hmm.
band, I'm offering involvement, and it's a crucial difference.
To talk to you about your sound a little bit now, it's easy for guitarists and bassists to have signature sounds because so much of their identity is associated with tones and effects. Consider me a complete layman. It's not the same for drums, right? Do you agree or disagree with this? And could you help us understand how you would define your signature sound?
I would mostly disagree with it. However, I have to say that these days, on metal records, especially, um, people just use a lot of samples instead of real sound, and they all use the same libraries, ending up having the same sound. And when a drummer has, back in the days where you couldn't quantize anything, drummers were
Mm-hmm.
playing it, and that was the way it was. If if the double bass, for instance, wasn't 100% tight, then that's it. You couldn't change it afterwards. What's recorded has been recorded. Now you have all these technical tricks in the studio where you can quantize a kick drum and do anything to that. And so the sound all depends on these things. I think the sound you do mainly come from your own touch. It's, for instance, if you compare it to a guitar, it's not so much the amplification on it, or the gain setting. It's much more in the fingers than what you would think, um, and and that's more of the personality and also the note choice. So as a drummer, it's the same thing. If you have a certain way of hitting the drums, which is your own, and you prefer certain techniques or musical figures that you like to repeat, then that's shaping your own sound and your own style. And I think it's not so much different from bass and guitar. It just depends how much you stick to these formulas that you created and how much you allow yourself to be yourself. And with a lot of productions these days, the producers don't allow bands to be themselves anymore. The drummer gets quantized no matter what, and then the guitarists put their stuff on quantized drums. So of course the drummer gets no chance to create his own voice in the first place because there's superior drum program, and that's how drums are supposed to sound these days. And I hate that. I hate the fact that nobody's putting effort anymore into that to shape a unique drum sound rather than a perfect drum sound. And also, it's not so interesting anymore in terms of performance. I think it's much more interesting when it's human rather than machine-like. But I would say it's still possible. You just have to do a lot of recordings and kind of be confident in trust the way you do things and repeat doing them. That's and have an own vision and try to enforce it. I think it's very 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 similar to a guitar player. It's just most of the times guitar player write the songs, and so it's easier for them to express their own style.
Okay, so you didn't answer the second part of the question, which was how would you define your own signature sound?
Uh, I wouldn't. I would say I would leave that to others to define it.
All right.
Um, but I would say that I have a certain way of playing that you can hear throughout the records I've done, even though also on the session recordings, even though the music might be different and what I play is different, it's still there's something in there that I can recognize. Um, what it
And
is
that's what makes
exactly,
you
I
you.
really don't analyze these things. I allow to let things happen the way they happen, and I think this, um, yeah, that's something that I think more people need to do. Just don't give up. I've read this, and it sounds like a really hollow phrase, but it's not. Don't give up authenticity for approval. If people find it odd in the first place, well, who knows? I remember when I listened to Meshuggah for the first time, they just came out with Destroy, Erase, Improve, and no one liked it, especially in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
They always,
Mm-hmm.
everyone thought, hey, what's that? It sucks. And look where they're now. So it's authenticity. Um, but then the problem was that everybody wanted to sound like that, and that is a problem. Why would you? They already exist. Why would you try to
Yeah.
achieve what somebody else did? I never understood that. I also was, for the first Obscura record we did, it was fine because it was our first record, but it sounded way too much like Death and
Yeah.
Cynic, in my opinion. And we had to come up with something different because what's the point in copying somebody else? There's no point in it in the
True.
long run.
So we've talked quite a bit about your art. Let's dig in a bit to Apophenia. Just looking at the guest list, you've got quite a few heavyweights. You've got Jeff Loomis, Marty Friedman on there. How did you get them to perform on the album? That's the first question. And the second is, how do you?
I
How
wrote
do
an
you?
email. Again, if people are not going to play on your record, how do you know without asking? You can ask them. And
Okay. So, did you end up writing a song which you thought was perfect for him to play, or how do you really select or hone in on a musician you'd like to collaborate with?
for those, especially for Jeff and Marty, it was solos, guest solos, and the solo sections themselves, how they were written. I, of course, when I write a lead section, then when I write a song, I think now it would be the perfect time for guitar solo because I like guitar solos, and then when I write the part, I always have a possible player in mind that could fit for this. Um, and yeah, with these two parts, I had these two players in mind exactly, and that's why I asked them, because I
Right.
think I would never ask somebody just because he has a certain name. If I don't see a musical connection to what someone does, like the riff over which Jeff Loomis does the solo, I think it's it's very Nevermore-ish. So I thought, yeah, he would be the perfect player to play on it. Hey, why don't I ask him? And that's where I come from. Yes, definitely.
So that's some great advice for everyone listening in. If you want someone to perform or a big name to perform on your album, EP, single, just email them, right?
So you're going to be receiving an email from us now.
Yeah.
We want you to record our introduction to the podcast.
Well, let's do it this way. If you don't search the contact, it, of course, will never happen. That's what I'm saying. I mean, given the fact that I've played with a few, bigger bands, then it's way easier for me to achieve that than to any
Yeah.
random guy. I agree, but still, I mean,
Of
still, to
course.
me,
Good.
Marty Friedman is one of my favorite lead guitar players, and that's why I wanted to have him on the album in the first place. I think his stuff rules. I think he's awesome, and that's where I'm coming from. And it's still a big thing for me that he's playing on the album. And but if you don't ask, you get no reply, of course.
Since we're still on the album, can you pick a song that you'd like our listeners to check out, and why did you pick that song?
Actually, I would say pick the opening track, first one, because it's quite a long track, and everything on most of my trademarks that I do in this kind of style. I also write in different styles of music, but for this kind of music that I'm doing on my solo records, this is pretty much summing up everything that I do, and where the key elements of my music. So I think that's a um, good starting point.
All right, so let's check out the first track of the album, Deep.
So that was Deep from Apophenia. Yes, I actually Googled how to pronounce that properly, which is why I can pronounce it properly. Anyways, Han, I was visiting your website and I love it, especially the part where you list your services. Here's a left field question based on what I read. Have you ever faced a project that simply takes forever, as in one in which there's so much back and forth with the client that you end up with, the meme of naming files, final one, final two, final three, final four, all the way through like maybe final 975?
Well, yes. Well, most of the time it's quicker than that, but I had a few extended sessions, of course. But to me, that's fine, that's what I offer, and I think that's the big advantage. Also, most of the time, when I send the first demo, like of a complete song, then people don't, they listen to it and then they list the amount of changes they want to have, and then I change it, and then there's maybe another revision, but that's most of the time that's it, because I know what they want in the first revision usually, because if they formulate, if somebody if I record something and I do all the revisions, and then I do them again, and then the band changes its mind completely and said, no, we actually changed our mind, we want everything completely different. That's never happening. What happened, I'm not sure what to do, actually, because then I think, oh, they just lost their mind. But
Yeah.
most of the time it's not happening. I had some extended sessions where I had to make a few tries, but most of the time it's pretty condensed, I would say.
Right.
Okay.
And after all, I want them to be happy for the recording, and I'm quite perfectionist with these things, so for me that's fine. I'm going back and forth.
Okay. So that brings me up to two questions, and it involves the area of teaching as such. First up, are there any common sense tips or lessons that you can share for that all drummers should know but are rarely mentioned in clinics or instructional videos or books? Like common sense stuff which no drummer should ideally forget, but they're never told.
Yes, there's one thing that comes to mind. You should always mic up your kick drum and put it on headphone. Always
Okay.
mic
Okay.
your
And why is that?
kick drum and put it on your headphones, because what I see that a lot of drummers which don't do it, they think they play tight kick drums, but they don't, because they cannot really hear it.
Okay.
Okay.
The second question to that was, considering you do record a lot of bands, what do you look out for in a band that's coming to record with you? What should be the level of preparation?
Well, the more prepared, the better. I would say levels of preparation.
As in, do you need them to be absolutely super tight before they come into record, know all their songs inside out? Because there are a lot of bands who prefer to write or jam out parts during the time of writing or during the time of recording.
Yeah. Well, I have actually facing a different problem often. These days, a lot of bands don't go to studios anymore so much. They record a lot of things at home because it's easier
Yeah.
than it was back in the day. Because all you need to do is record a DI track, and
Yeah.
then of course they don't have the experience of an audio engineer. So then you can see that the quality they end up having is less than when they would go to a studio. So most of the bands that really go to a studio to do their recordings, they only focus themselves on the actual performance, not so much on the technical aspect of recording. That's what you do when you engineer yourself. So that's mostly the problem I have with guitarists and bassists, that they engineered themselves and it's not as good as it could be, and then I have to repair a lot of things. And when we come to the studio, even though if they're not 100% prepared to the songs, there's ways to work around that. What to me is more important that they can focus on their performance only. That's really important. I would say if somebody comes unprepared into the studio, well, then it takes forever, which is annoying. And of course, they won't do their best. But most of the time, if people come to the studio and spend the money, they will be prepared.
Right.
It's my experience. So, as
Right.
at least well enough to get a really good result. Um, Most of the time, I have problems with people recording at home and not deliver the quality they could have when doing it professionally.
Yeah, so that's some sound advice for the bands listening in.
Yeesh, what a pun.
But one of the things I also found quite cool while reading your biography on your website was that you have an MBA. So, how important do you feel it is for musicians in today's age to have a sound understanding of business?
Um, well, I guess it's a crucial part for any one who offers a service to
Right.
know the basics of that. But you don't have to study that. It's more or less common sense, I would say. There's also things you need to learn by doing. But I would say it definitely does not hurt. Um, I wouldn't even say I'm particularly good in the marketing aspect. I'm so because I'm more interested in the music, and that's what I want to do. And the less I have to spend on time on marketing and do business stuff, I'm really happy to do so because I don't really like it. But it's necessary. It is.
So, what's next for you? I mean, I know you just put out your third solo album, but do you have any other plans recording with Alkaloid, any of your other bands, touring?
We are yeah with Triptykon we are going to perform on Roadburn Festival
Oh,
this
yeah.
next Friday, where we're going to film a DVD and Blu-ray of the performance. We're playing with an orchestra,
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
and
wow.
the next big thing. I'm very much looking forward to that. I think it's going to be fantastic.
That's huge. Yeah, even
Yeah.
we are definitely looking forward to that.
On the horizon, there would be a real new album then, also for Alkaloid. But I mean, we have loose ideas with Alkaloid of songs, but
Okay, cool.
there's one thing that Morian, our singer, told me that he has an idea for a song with music that's never been done before, and if he says so, I believe that because he's a classical composer and has done all kinds of weird things. And I would say, um, I wait for him to do a first sketch of what he has in mind and then go from there. I think it could be something come out really unique.
And I'm really surprised to hear that because after hearing your last album, I was wondering how you guys are going to top Rise of the Cephaloids. And I think you kind of you're on the path that way, I guess.
Yeah, let's see. I mean, I also have some concepts in mind, but I would rather speak about it once it's final, or once we have something final to say. I'm looking forward to that. It's always very challenging with Alkaloid, and also interesting because that's musically the most rewarding thing for me. Also, I actually have, believe it or not, almost enough songs to do another solo album. So probably by end of the year, I will drop out another solo record.
Oh, wow.
That's news.
These I have to mention that the songs on Apophenia are 2 years old. I wrote them in 2017, and then it just took, because there was so much other stuff in between, that it took so long to finally put them out. And that will not happen again with this new one.
Okay, so we are making it official. Santa, we are asking you for a new album by Christmas.
And we promise we'll be good boys.
That's very likely, actually.
Lovely. Okay, Han, my final question to you, or our final question to you. Have you ever played in a drum circle?
A drum circle? You mean where some? Is that the thing where like one guy, or you have one drum and you play in a repetitive rhythm, like with a lot of people.
Yep.
Yep.
I've never done it, and I hate these things because it's most of the time it's housewives that have no rhythm or talent. Yeah. It might be, it might be different in India because your the rhythms you have in Indian folk music are so complicated. Most German people wouldn't even get them in the first place, but over here it's it's quite horrible, these drum circle things. I don't like him and I will never be part of it.
All right. On that note, Han, thank you so much for your time. This has been a lovely, enjoyable conversation.
It was I agree, we had a lot of fun.
And especially on a Monday, so you've kind of brightened up our Mondays also.
Yeah, a good start of the week.
Yeah, Mondays are fine. Your life that sucks.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right,
Horns
man.
up.
Horns up.
Okay, arms up. Bye-bye.
That was quite a fun chat, Animesh.
Yeah, it was a perfect start to what is. We are recording this on a Monday, so it is a perfect start to the week. Couldn't have asked for a more enjoyable chat. It felt like a good, refreshing Coca-Cola, iced cold Coca-Cola. Am I allowed to mention brands?
Well, unless they sponsor it. Hint, hint.
Now we're going to make money out of Hornsub. Pretty soon you'll see Hornsub merchandise, Hornsub website. 10 episodes हो गए, देखते हैं और क्या क्या होता है.
Yeah, throw some bones, guys.
Reach out to us.
Patreon coming soon.
Patreon coming soon.
Sorry, we're having too much fun with this.
Anyways, okay, yeah. But yeah, you can reach out to us. We are on Twitter. It's at HornsUpPod.
I'm Trend Crusher.
And I'm at Asmo Annie. And we're recording this in an office, which is why you can hear a lot of people talking in the back. But deal with it because that's what we are doing. We'll see you next week. Next week we've got Entombed.
Yeah. I'm a huge Swedish death metal fan. So it was great just to pick the brain of one of the people that was responsible for the subgenre, if you may call it.
Yeah, that buzzsaw guitar sound. We'll actually explore that a little bit, hopefully.
Yeah, and also just kind of find out as to what the hell was in the water in Sweden back then, man.
Yeah, but that's for next week. Till then, horns up.
Horns up.